Returning to our top story this evening in the ongoing search for Nancy Guthrie, the Pima County Sheriff's Department says the suspect's clothes may have been purchased from Walmart, but they're not exclusively available at that store.
At 2:28 in the morning on February 1st, 2026, Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker went silent, and the only phone call that explains why has never been made public. The truth behind Nancy Guthrie's last phone call is what investigators have been circling since day one. A single piece of communication that placed a specific person on a specific timeline.
No one's been cleared. Everyone's a suspect. So it is not inappropriate to start where all law enforcement starts, which is with the family, and work out.
Inside a 4-hour window of silence that nobody has been able to account for. What that call revealed is the reason this case still burns, and why the FBI went quiet the moment they first pulled the record. On Saturday, January 31st, 2026, Nancy called an Uber at 5:32 in the evening from her home in the Catalina Foothills neighborhood of Tucson, Arizona. She was headed to her eldest daughter Annie's house 4 miles away for a family dinner and game night. Nothing looked wrong, nothing felt off. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos later confirmed to the New York Times that she was dropped off at home and that her companion made sure she got safely inside before driving away. The garage door opened at 9:48 p.m. and closed at 9:50 p.m.
Ashley Banfield, who hosts her own podcast called Drop Dead Serious, is breaking exclusives on this case like nobody's business. And yesterday, she had quite a doozy.
Then nothing. At 1:47 a.m., Nancy's Google Nest doorbell camera was disconnected. At 2:12 a.m., the motion system picked up a figure near the home. At 2:28 a.m., her pacemaker stopped transmitting to the monitoring app on her phone. Her phone, wallet, car keys, and daily heart medication were all found inside the next day. She never called anyone after she got home. She never texted. Whatever happened in that house during those 4 hours, Nancy Guthrie faced it completely alone. The son-in-law everyone suspected. The last communication on Nancy's phone didn't come from a stranger. It led back to someone who had been at that dinner table just hours before she disappeared. And that single fact is what detonated the first wave of suspicion before investigators had processed a single piece of physical evidence. Tommaso Tioni, Nancy's son-in-law, was the person who drove her home that night. He was the last confirmed person to see her alive. He knew the layout of the house. He knew where the cameras were. The phone record that FBI analysts had been staring at pointed directly at the gap between his departure and the moment the pacemaker went dark. The internet had already made up its mind. One name was everywhere. Social media moved faster than any fact checker could follow.
They now believe the son-in-law may be the prime suspect. Those are the words. Son-in-law may be the prime suspect at this point.
But here's what the online mob never addressed. The picture of this man's actual life looked nothing like what they were building. Tommaso Tioni had taught AP biology in Tucson for over 15 years. On Christmas Day 2025, just weeks before Nancy vanished, she posted a family photo with Tommaso standing right beside her, holding the family dog. She was beaming. Family friend Zach Lind, the drummer from Jimmy Eat World, stated publicly that Annie and Tommy were dedicated parents who loved and cared for Nancy on a daily basis. None of that stopped the accusations. Journalist Ashley Banfield reported on her podcast that a trusted law enforcement source had identified Tioni as the prime suspect. When challenged on Dan Abrams' Sirius XM show, she doubled down, saying things had really tightened up inside the sheriff's department following her report. FBI agents were seen at Annie and Tommaso's home on February 7th for approximately 3 hours. Camera flashes visible from inside, deputies emerging in blue gloves carrying evidence bags. Annie's car was impounded. Unverified claims about $50 million in gambling debts owed to a Mexican casino spread like wildfire before being completely debunked by multiple reputable outlets. The damage was done long before the corrections caught up. Then on February 16th, Sheriff Nanos stood in front of cameras and said what his department had known since the investigation's first days. The Guthrie family, including all siblings and their spouses, had been cleared as possible suspects. He called the accusations not only wrong, but cruel. The family had been ruled out early and had been 100% cooperative throughout. Cleared on paper. But the phone record that started this entire chain of suspicion still sat in evidence. And the crime scene it pointed back to told a story of its own, one involving failures so serious that the investigators themselves eventually had to answer for them. The investigation that almost fell apart. When the Pima County Sheriff's Department arrived at Nancy's home on February 2nd, the scene was immediately alarming. Blood droplets on the front porch were later confirmed through DNA testing to be hers. Signs of forced entry. Small glass fragments near the front entrance. The doorbell camera appeared to have been deliberately tampered with. Sheriff Nanos stated bluntly, she did not walk away. Investigators believed she had been forced to leave that residence against her will. The FBI joined almost immediately. At its peak, 400. Investigators worked around the clock. Over 50,000 tips poured in. Behind the scenes, critical errors were compounding. The crime scene was released prematurely. Nanos admitted it himself, forcing investigators to return days later for evidence missed on the first pass. A roof-mounted camera was overlooked entirely on the initial walkthrough. The doorbell footage was declared unrecoverable because Nancy didn't have a paid Nest subscription, only for the FBI to later pull images from residual back-end data that should have been the first move on day one. The county's high-tech search aircraft pilot had been disciplined following a dispute with Nanos and reassigned to street patrol before the case even began. The department's most experienced search and rescue deputy had been transferred out in late 2025 with no replacement. More than 20 people were detained and released during the investigation. Luke Anthony Daly was pulled from a residence 2 miles from Nancy's, home in a full SWAT operation, held for hours alongside his 77-year-old mother, then released with no link to the case confirmed. Dominic Evans, an elementary school teacher who played in Tommaso's band, was targeted by online theorists who claimed his build matched the figure in the doorbell footage. He told the New York Times he felt like someone had taken his name for clickbait and entertainment, while innocent people got hurt. The actual suspect remained a grainy silhouette in 4 black and white images. A male, 5'9" to 5'10". Average build, ski mask, gloves. A black Ozark Trail backpack sold exclusively at Walmart. A detail investigators flagged immediately, because it narrows the purchase trail to a single retailer's transaction records. A visible gun holster, size 12 shoes, estimated from the tile dimensions in the footage. That ski mask had unique stitching that analysts said might be traceable to a specific manufacturer. Whoever he was, he had done. His homework. He knew about the cameras. He came prepared for exactly this kind of night, which tells investigators something critical. This was not opportunistic. Someone had watched Nancy's home, knew her habits, and chose the night deliberately. The ransom demands didn't come through traditional channels. They came through email, sent to CBS Tucson affiliate KOLD-TV, a second Tucson station, and TMZ, spaced roughly 12 hours apart, each one escalating, each one revealing more than it should have known. TMZ founder Harvey Levin provided the most detailed public account, visibly unsettled as he described the first note on air. The letter laid out precisely what the kidnappers wanted, what the consequences would be if they didn't get it, and how the demands escalated across 2 deadlines. $6 million in Bitcoin, a verified wallet address, a first deadline of 5 p.m., Thursday, February 5th, and a second, more severe consequence tied to 5 p.m., Monday, February 9th. What made that note terrifying wasn't the dollar amount. It was what the author knew. Details that had never been made public. The location of Nancy's Apple Watch, information about a floodlight at the property, a precise description of what Nancy had been wearing the night she disappeared. A retired FBI agent reviewing the note flagged one specific phrase. The author used the abbreviation USD for dollars. Americans almost never write it that way in casual communication. Either the writer was foreign-born, or it was deliberate misdirection from someone sophisticated enough to think about linguistic fingerprints. A second note arrived around February 18th, more graphic than the first, demanding payment in a different cryptocurrency and citing media coverage as a direct trigger for the escalation. Whoever wrote it had been watching the news, adjusting, responding in near real time. A separate series of emails arrived from a third party claiming to have information about the kidnapper and offering it for 1 Bitcoin, roughly $70,000. TMZ confirmed the tone was clearly different from the original notes, 3 different voices, 3 different angles, all circling the same missing woman. Then there was Derek Kella, a 42-year-old from Hawthorne, California, arrested after texting Nancy Guthrie and Tommaso Tioni directly. "Did you get the Bitcoin? We are waiting on our end for the transaction." The FBI traced it to his Gmail account within days. He was charged with transmitting a demand for ransom in interstate commerce. He had nothing to do with the actual kidnapping. He had watched the coverage, seen an opportunity, and inserted himself into a family's worst nightmare for reasons that remain unclear. Both real deadlines passed, no confirmed payment, no further contact from the actual kidnappers. The Bitcoin wallet address in the first note was never publicly confirmed as having received a transaction. The family said only that they were ready to listen and that they would pay. But whether any communication reached the actual perpetrators remained a question law enforcement refused to answer on the record. CNN analyst John Miller offered the most chilling read on what that silence meant. This may have begun as a planned home invasion that went completely sideways, then was re-engineered into a kidnap for ransom scenario because the suspect's options had narrowed to nothing. A plan that fractured in real time and left an 84-year-old woman somewhere in the middle of it. The ransom notes were digital, no handwriting to analyze, no paper to trace. Every lead ran back to the same dead end. The DNA that matched nobody. One black glove was found in an open field 2 miles from Nancy's home, appearing to match what the masked suspect wore in the doorbell footage. The FBI extracted a DNA profile from it. Unknown male, no match in CODIS, the national database containing roughly 22 million samples. The suspect had never been arrested for a qualifying felony. Here is where the investigation fractures. The DNA from that glove did not match the unknown DNA recovered from inside Nancy's property. 2 different samples, 2 different profiles. That means investigators aren't looking for one person. They may be looking for 2 or more. Inside the home, the forensic picture grew more complicated. Several samples contained mixed genetic material that standard lab techniques couldn't untangle. The samples were sent to a private lab in Florida rather than the FBI's facility at Quantico. Former Chief Deputy Richard Castigar didn't mince words. All the evidence should have gone to Quantico from the beginning. The decision to route it elsewhere was a mistake. Forensic science professor April Stonehouse at Arizona State University described the core problem with the kind of precision that makes investigators lose sleep. The interior samples likely contained 90% of Nancy's own DNA and only 10% from a potential suspect. Separating a signal that faint from that much noise isn't just difficult. It is the ratio that defines whether a case gets solved or goes cold. C.C. Moore, chief genetic genealogist at Parabon Nanolabs, offered a thread of hope. Even if standard profiling fails on that 10% signal, the same sample might still support investigative genetic genealogy, the technique that identified the Golden State Killer after decades of dead ends. That process involves building family trees from distant DNA relatives in public genealogy databases, then narrowing down to the likely suspect through conventional detective work. It is painstaking, it takes months, and it requires a profile clean enough to match against partial relatives. Whether the interior samples in this case meet that threshold is a question the lab in Florida has not yet answered publicly. Forensic scientist Peter Valentine of the University of New Haven added that if multiple people entered that home, there must be physical evidence beyond DNA, hair, fibers, trace materials that don't degrade the same way biological samples do. The labs, he said, need to look beyond the obvious if you want to follow every development in this case as it breaks, because this investigation is not over. Subscribe right now. We cover the details the mainstream coverage leaves out. And the next move in this case could change everything. A daughter's words. Savannah Guthrie had spent her entire career delivering news about other people's worst days. On February 4th, 2026, she was a daughter who didn't know whether her mother was alive or dead. She stepped away from every professional obligation, including a planned role co-hosting the 2026 Winter Olympics opening ceremonies, to focus entirely on finding Nancy. On February 4th, she appeared alongside siblings Annie and Cameron in their first public video, speaking directly to whoever had taken their mother We need to know without a doubt that she is alive. We want to hear from you. We are ready to listen. Please reach out to us." Her voice barely held. 3 days later, the siblings stood holding hands in a second video that appeared to respond directly to the ransom demands. "We received your message and we understand. We beg you now to return our mother to us. We will pay." The February 24th statement was different from anything before it. Savannah announced a $1 million family reward, payable entirely in cash, tips completely anonymous, and then said publicly what everyone had been quietly dreading. Every hour and minute and second and every long night has been agony. We still believe in a miracle. We also know she may be lost. She may already be gone. She may have gone home to the Lord she loves, dancing in heaven with her mom and dad. The family donated $500,000 to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Annie never spoke individually about the suspicion aimed at her husband. Her silence was read a dozen ways: legal strategy, family loyalty, or simply the impossibility of defending your spouse in public while privately not knowing if your mother is still breathing. On March 2nd, day 30, Savannah, Annie, and Tommaso walked arm in arm to the growing tribute of yellow flowers outside Nancy's home. News cameras captured them from a distance. Audible sobbing carried across the footage. They left a handwritten note pressed among the flowers. "Mama, we miss you so much. Our hearts are broken. We are standing on ash, on scorched earth. But though we are surrounded by so much darkness and uncertainty, our love burns bright. We love you, Mommy." President Donald Trump personally called Savannah on February 4th following an NBC interview, offering federal resources and pledging full government support. The White House confirmed the conversation publicly. Federal assets were committed to the search. The case had reached a level of national attention that made it impossible to ignore at any level of government. The family had begged publicly, offered a fortune, let their private grief become a national event. Savannah later confirmed the reward could be paid entirely in cash and that tips could be submitted with complete anonymity. None of it brought Nancy home. What the phone record still hasn't answered. The FBI has Nancy's phone. They have her pacemaker data. The phone record is in evidence. The glove DNA sits in a Florida lab. The masked figure with the Walmart backpack has not been identified. Investigators have confirmed she was taken against her will. They have confirmed violence occurred at the scene. They have confirmed the ransom communications came from at least 2 different parties. They have confirmed the glove DNA matches no one in the national database. 2 profiles, 2 potential suspects, and a forensic lab still trying to separate a 10% signal. From 90% noise, 50,000 tips have been reviewed. More than 20 people were detained and released. The best qualified search personnel weren't even there when they were needed. A crime scene was released too early and had to be reprocessed. A roof camera was missed. Doorbell footage declared gone was later pulled from back-end servers that should have been the first call on day 1. All of that matters. But the thread that runs through every part of this case, through every mistake, every accusation, every ransom note, every silent deadline, is not the glove. It is not the grainy figure caught on camera. It is the call, the last communication Nancy Guthrie ever made as a free woman. The FBI went quiet when they first pulled that record. Not because it told them nothing, but because of exactly what it told them, about the hours between a garage door closing at 9:50 p.m. and a pacemaker going silent at 2:28 a.m. In federal kidnapping investigations, you don't withhold a detail like that unless it still points somewhere, unless the trail is still warm, unless releasing it would compromise the one lead that hasn't gone cold. That call is still the center of everything. What was said in it, and what happened because of it, is the truth this case has been built around from the beginning, and it has not yet been told. Now tell us, after everything you've heard, do you think investigators are closing in? Or is something in this timeline still being missed? Drop your answer in the comments. We read every single one. And if this is the kind of deep dive coverage you want more of, subscribe now so you never miss what comes next.